What the fuck is up, losers? It's your boy, Porcupine. Today we're counting down the top 5 games of the year 2022. It took me a while because I had to finish one of the games on this list. And I have to say, this was a pretty banger year for video games. Last year was probably the worst year for games ever. Honestly, there was like one good game. And this year we got 5 straight bangers here that I'm about to break down for you. Overall, probably one of the best years for gaming ever. I mean, the top 2 on this list are probably top 2 of all time, maybe. I mean, Jesus. So before we start, I want to give issue a honorable mention here. This would have made the list, but it's not actually technically a game. I want to give a shout out to the Cuphead DLC that finally released after long await. And yeah, it's very good. We get a whole new world of various different bosses. The bosses are top-notch quality. They also added some cool side missions where you don't have any guns. You just have to beat them with parrying attacks, and it kind of changed up the gameplay a lot, made it a lot more interesting. The new Chalice character is fuckable. And yeah, it's just pretty, everything all around good. The animation's good. The new final boss is really good. And yeah, just a banger, 10 out of 10. Moving on to the number 5 game, we got Sifu. And this is basically John Wick Simulator. It starts with some sad story about like your father getting killed, and then the whole story is a revenge narrative of you just fighting through waves of enemies, John Wick style, with a bunch of people coming after you, and you have to learn these different combos to be able to block stuff and chain certain moves together. One of the main gimmicks of the game is the permadeath system that the game has, where every time you die, you slowly age, and it's a compounding punishment, where if you die twice in a row without killing another enemy, then you age twice as fast. So it is pretty unforgiving system. And then when you get to age 70, there's permadeath. You have to go back to the beginning or to the most recent level. But if you go back to the most recent level, it saves all your aging. So if you finish the first level at level 60, you're going to die almost instantaneously. So you really have to master each level if you want to be able to get to the end of the game, which I have yet to do as of the recording this video. But the game also looks very cinematic, the way the camera moves. It'll be like you'll be in one scene you're in a club, fighting a bunch of people, and then when you go in the hallway, it'll go to a hallway view, and now you're fighting, side-scrolling. Just kind of cool things they do with the camera to make it look like a action movie. You can also pick up various weapons and smash people in the head with glass bottles and pool cues and all this type of stuff. So the gameplay, it's awesome. I mean, you can just see it on the screen right now. It's crazy. But yeah, that's a banger game. Check it out. Very hard. Moving on to the number 4 game, we got Kirby and the Forgotten Land. And this one really surprised me with how good it was. I had never played any of the previous Kirby games, so I don't know what they're like, but this one I did thoroughly enjoy. The combat is what I really liked, is it has pretty complex combat for a kid's game. The bosses have their own move sets that they do. You have to learn the different patterns and stuff. The basic gimmick of the game is you can absorb different characters to gain their powers. And there's 10 or 13 different move sets in the game, and they play completely different. Kirby also is able to turn into various objects as well, kind of similar to Mario Odyssey, where you can become a car and a cone. Very cool stuff. Now moving on to the number 3 game here, we got Neon White. Now this game is essentially a sort of speedrunner's wet dream here. It's a platformer first-person shooter game where not only does every gun have a unique combat ability for the combat encounters, it also has a platforming mechanic as well. The guns are given to you in the form of cards that you pick up throughout the game. Then when you discard the card, it'll give you an ability, so you can discard a pistol to jump. You can discard one of the cards to like throw a bomb. And at first, it feels like a regular platformer shooter, but you realize after a while that the game is built around speed running. The levels are designed to get through them super fast, and in order to progress through the game, you have to beat the levels in a certain time frame. And I thought the levels were really tightly designed, really well. The platforming feels amazing. The gunplay was also great. Everything about the game is solid. It's a very short game. You can probably beat it in a few days, but yeah, definitely worth your time. The only downside is, again, it's very short. Some of the boss fights are a bit weak, especially the final boss was not as cool as it could have been. And the cutscenes and dialogue are insufferable. I pretty much skipped through all of that. After a while, it's just grating how awful the writing is, but you're mainly going to be playing this game just for the gameplay, not for the story or anything. And yeah, it's a great time. Highly recommend it. When I first saw gameplay of this, it looked extremely overwhelming with how many different abilities and cards there were, but they do a great job of sort of drip feeding each ability and really making sure you understand how to use each ability before they move on to the next one. And I thought they did a really excellent job where by the end of the game you feel like the platforming master. I mean, you feel like a god. But yeah, this is a great game. And moving on to the number 2 game, it's Elden Ring. What a surprise. And this is the new From Software game. Basically just Dark Souls in an open world. And the Dark Souls games have always incentivized exploration and stuff like that, so it's a kind of a no-brainer that they would bring it to an open world game. And yeah, they translated it into an open world, I think, incredibly well. It's not your typical follow a waypoint and repeat the same monotonous, repetitive, dog shit, retard gameplay that 99% of open world games play like. It's more of a Breath of the Wild style open world where you're free to explore wherever you want. There is no waypoints. The game doesn't tell you where you have to go or what you have to do. They also made a lot of huge improvements, just quality of life improvements to the Dark Souls games that it makes it so you don't even want to go back to the old ones anymore. You can see on the map where your souls dropped, so you don't have to constantly remember where you died. They also made it so that you always respawn right next to the boss. There is no more fucking hour-long run-ups to a boss to just die and die again, which got absolutely absurd in the Souls games. And there's one in Dark Souls 2 where you literally have to make like a 15-minute run in order to even get one attempt at the boss. Y'all know what I'm talking about, that fucking Blizzard level. That was absolute garbage. But yeah, they've completely done away with that. You instant spawn right next to the boss. And they've also taken elements from all of their previous games and sort of put all the best stuff in this game. The combat is pretty much exactly Dark Souls, but I think even better, slightly more faster paced. And there's also stealth elements from the Sekiro games. You can sneak up on certain enemies, backstab them. So they take all the elements of the games that make them good, combine them all into one game. And another huge game changer is you have a horse that helps you, traverse the world, but also in combat it can work as well too. You can sideswipe people with the horse. It's useful for a lot of the different bosses, are kind of intended for you to be riding on the horse. And yeah, I thought the horse gameplay was excellent. It's a bit finicky at first, but once you get used to it, it feels really good. Jesus fuck. And yeah, it's just, the combat is excellent. S tier. The world is also extremely massive. Very beautiful designs of the different worlds. You see all sorts. There's like a sort of hell world. There's an ice section of the map. There's they did there's swamp stuff. There's underground shit. I mean, a lot of different shit in here. To give some context as to how massive this world is, I was like 40 hours into the game before I realized that I had only done 2 of the main story bosses out of the 10 or however many there is. Just because there's that much side content. I thought I was playing main content, but apparently it was all side content. And yeah, so that gives you an idea of how massive it is. I did all the bosses, and that took like over 100-something hours. So an unreal amount of content in this game. I do have a few gripes with the game that I did want to mention, which is why it didn't quite make the number 1 spot. I think the biggest problem with the game just comes from the openness of the world. You can essentially, when you get to a boss, whereas in Dark Souls, when you get to a boss, you kind of have to over and over retry until you beat the boss because it's a more linear structure. Here, if you get stuck on a boss, you can just go leave and go do whatever. And this leads to a lot of problems where you may initially get to a boss and you're way under-leveled and you have to leave and come back. But then when you come back, now you're really over-leveled and you beat the boss in like 3 hits. And yeah, that happened a lot where you go back to the early game bosses and you literally are beating them in 1 hit. I'm not even exaggerating. But yeah, they try to sort of prevent this problem by gating certain sections of the map off until you progress far enough into the story. But even with them trying to mitigate it, it still is a pretty big problem in the game. Another big problem with the game, and you'll really only notice this if you try to like 100% the game, is there's a lot of reused shit throughout the game. There's bosses that are reused, especially a lot of the mini bosses. There are these one mini bosses that look like cat creatures with staves, and you have to fight these things like 17 times in some form or another. You also, like, even for main game bosses, they'll reuse them over and over again. There's the Godskin duo you have to fight like at least 12 times, some version of them or another. Yeah, it's kind of insane. Even like areas are reused as well. You'll go through a lot of the dungeons are like copy paste the layout. They just replace what enemies are in there. And yeah, most people probably aren't going to notice this on the initial playthrough, but for the hardcore fans that are going to go through every single dungeon, you are going to notice there's a lot of repeated shit. And probably the worst part of the game is the Godskin duo boss fight. It is so unimaginably god-awful. It's pretty much Ornstein and Smaug or whatever from the first Dark Souls game. But imagine you're playing Ornstein and Smaug, and every time you beat them, they respawn again. So you're fighting 2 people endlessly it's extremely aggressive. They non-stop attack you, and they keep respawning every time you kill them. You have to kill them, like, I think 5 times or something like that. It's absolutely insane. It's probably the worst boss fight ever ever. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Elden Ring. Even with all those negatives, I still do think this is an incredibly great game. One of my favorite games of all time. So even with these negative effects, it's still a great game. I do hope that they still, continue to make these open world games, but also make some of the games from the older, more linear style. I hope they don't just only make open world games from now on, but I guess we'll see. But yeah, Elden Ring is a masterpiece. It's fire. And moving on to number 1. Moving on to the number 1 game, it's God of War Ragnarok. You knew it. And yeah, this game is just a master. You're coming the whole time you're playing this. I mean, just nonstop. You're just and yeah, just everything about the game, the story, the characters, the visuals are amazing to look at. Even though it's not even exclusive to the next gen consoles. It's on last gen as well, but it has some of the best visuals I've ever seen. And the combat is just so amazing. It's just so godly, honestly. Pretty much everything is the same as the first game, but improved in every conceivable way. Just by virtue of the fact that you start this game with the Blades of Chaos, whereas you didn't have them until towards the end of the last game. That already makes the combat, way more diverse than in the first game. And then, spoiler alert, you get a third weapon as well. You get a spear halfway through the game. And by the time you get the spear, I mean, the combat just feels amazing. You're switching between 3 different weapons, chaining together all these special abilities with each weapon. And I mean, just it's immaculate. It's an immaculate experience. Not only does each weapon have, very unique combat abilities. It also, each weapon has, ways to interact with the world for the puzzle solving. The Leviathan axe can freeze things for puzzles. The Blades of Chaos can set things on fire. Then when you get the spear, you can like throw it into walls and like jump on it and stuff. What they did with the weapons, I thought was amazing. It was genius, game design genius. And I really enjoyed the story as well. It further incorporates a bunch of the Norse mythology stuff, and it starts right where the last game left off with Thor meeting Kratos. And then by the end of the story, it culminates in this massive, epic battle with all the different characters. There's a giant dog that can teleport dimensions. There's like, you feel like you're in this gigantic battle. It was a truly epic ending. The voice acting is really great. The visuals where you can explore all of the different realms in this one, and they all look great. They're all very distinct from one another. Another thing that's greatly improved from the previous God of War game is the enemy variety and the boss variety. In the first game, a lot of the bosses are reused, and it's almost the exact same fights over and over. But in this game, every single boss is completely distinct from the last one, and every single boss is an epic spectacle to behold. I mean, it's great boss fights all around. I do have a few criticisms of the game. One is there's actually 2 playable characters in this game. You not only play as Kratos, but you play as Atreus, his son, Atreus/Loki. And the Atreus gameplay is fun, but the combat just feels so much dumbed down compared to Kratos' combat that every time you're playing as Atreus, you're just waiting, counting down the minutes till you can play as Kratos again. You just want to get this dumb fucking kid off the screen so you can finally play as Kratos again, which, I mean, they couldn't really make Atreus' gameplay as interesting as Kratos. I don't know if they would have been able to do that realistically, but it is a bit annoying playing as Atreus because you're getting blue balls waiting for Kratos. And another criticism is the difficulty. It seems way easier than the previous one. Either it got way easier or I've just gotten better at games since 2016. But yeah, judging by what other people said, it seems like this one's a lot more easy. So if you want a more challenging experience, go with the higher difficulties, because none of the bosses even took more than like 2 tries, and I was playing on the regular difficulty mode, so I don't know if that was intentional or not. There are some of the side bosses that are much harder, but as far as the main story, there's nothing really, any challenge. And another problem with the difficulty is that it seems like the ranged attacks are almost too OP. A lot of the bosses, the best strategy is just to run around and keep throwing your axe until the thing dies, which is not very fun. But for a lot of bosses, that seems like the only effective strategy. And then another criticism I have is when I was playing through on the game on the PS5, I got probably the worst visual glitch I've ever seen in a game, where the entire game for like 5 or 6 hours of my playthrough was like completely, it looked like a deep fried meme. The saturation was up to like level 100 and the entire screen just looked orange. That's not a joke. That was for like a big portion of my gameplay that I couldn't even see anything. Yeah, luckily I think they changed it in an update, but there was like nothing that would fix it. My whole screen was orange. So yeah, I don't know if that's, I assume that's a rare thing because I have not heard anyone else say that. But anyway, God of War Ragnarok is a masterpiece. It is a near perfect game. I would say probably perfect, almost perfect game. And yeah, check it out. Apparently this is the end of the Norse mythology saga for God of War, which, I mean, I don't know what they're going to do next. I hope they incorporate some more modern religions, like have Kratos fighting Jesus or Muhammad or something like that is what I would want to see. But, who knows where they're going to go next. I mean, I'm excited. But, yeah, so it was some banger games this year. And we didn't even get the new Zelda this year. We were supposed to get a Zelda game. I mean, even without that, it was one of the best years of the games. Best year for gaming. And yeah, so those are my picks. Let me know if you agree. And fuck you.